Hello, and welcome to Dark Hearts with Stacy Lee. Oh, how time changes things. The older I get, the more apparent it becomes. Time can change absolutely everything. What is black becomes white, what is up becomes down. And then there are other instances where time changes nothing at all. The older I get, the less I know. I am sure of almost nothing. And today we are talking about a case where I am sure of even less. When I was 19 years old, I was holding my baby who had just turned a year old, and I was watching TV. A news flash came across the screen. There had been a double murder in a mansion in Beverly Hills, California. Was it a cult? Was it a robbery? Was it devil worshippers? These were all the things that were blamed back then whenever someone rich and privileged was killed. That was back before we all knew that when a horrific murder occurs, it's most likely someone close to the victim that commits it. And this was no different. But as the weeks passed, we all became shocked and horrified as the news came out. And now, 35 years later, everything we thought we were so sure of has been turned on its head, and many of our opinions have been changed by time. Right now, it looks like something major is going to happen in this case, and it could happen very, very quickly. This is the story of what is happening now with Lyle and Erik Menendez, the Menendez Brothers Revisited. I'm your host, Stacy Lee. Let's begin. I am not going to go deep into the past and the actual murder today. I'm going to do a very brief rundown of the timeline, and then we are going to talk about what is going on right now. Why so many people believe that the Menendez brothers should be freed after spending the majority of their lives in prison, and whether or not that is just, right, and fair. Let's go back in time. It is August 20th, 1989. RCA Records executive turned film executive Jose Menendez, age 45, and his wife Kitty Menendez, age 47, are at home in their Beverly Hills mansion. It's a Sunday evening, and Jose and Kitty are lounging in their living room watching TV. They have two sons who are 21-year-old Lyle and 18-year-old Erik. Lyle and Erik go to the movies that night, and when they come home, they find a massacre, or so they claim. Jose and Kitty Menendez have been brutally murdered, obliterated, really, with shotgun blasts to the face and chest, where they sat on their couch in their living room. Lyle picks up the phone and calls 911.
Beverly Hills emergency?
Yes, police.
What's the problem? What's the problem? What's the problem?
Someone killed my parents.
Pardon me?
Someone killed my parents.
What? Who? Are they still there?
Yes.
The people...
No.
Were they shot?
Hey, man,
Were they shot?
Yes.
They were shot?
Yes.
102 response. 722 North Elmore.
What happened? Hey, stand up,
I have a hysterical person on. We're trying to get screened further. Other units responding. Is the person still there?
What happened? We have units around. What happened? Who shot who?
I don't know anything. I just came home.
You came home and found who shot?
My mom and dad.
You know if they're still in the house, the people that did the shooting.
Get away from them.
Okay. Hey, let me talk to Erik. Who is the person that was shot?
My mom and my dad.
Your mom and dad?
My mom and my dad.
Okay, hold on a second. Okay, we're on our way over there with an ambulance.
Okay, I gotta go.
Okay.
Hello?
Hello, this is police department.
Yes?
Okay, I want you to come outside. Okay, just come out the front door.
I gotta tell my brother.
The police arrived to the posh Beverly Hills mansion with Mercedes and other luxury vehicles sitting in the driveway and find the two boys, young adults, at home with their parents' dead bodies. Lyle and Erik tell the police that they have arrived home to find their parents shot to death. Everyone in the area is shocked and they console Lyle and Erik. But then the young men begin to draw suspicion because their behavior was strange. They started spending their parents' money. Lots and lots of money. They bought Rolex watches, they bought real estate, they invested in businesses, and they gave their friends money. Months went by and the brothers' behavior continued. They didn't seem to be grieving at all. They were living large, buying designer clothes and partying a lot. If anything, they seemed happier with their parents dead. And then the police get a phone call. On the phone is this woman, Judalon Smythe, and she is the girlfriend of the Menendez Brothers therapist, a psychologist that Lyle and Erik had been seeing. Judalon tells the police that during therapy, the brothers had confessed to their therapist that they were the ones who killed their parents. Now, there are so many ethical violations and implications here. We will have to leave that for another day, and we are going to do a deep dive on this story. The police begin to watch the brothers, and they gather more information on them based on this information that came from their therapist's girlfriend. In March of 1990, the police feel they have enough evidence and Lyle is arrested. Erik, who is on vacation, then turns himself in days later. From the jump, this case was a media sensation. You have these two very good-looking young men. They are rich, they're athletic, they're living in Beverly Hills, and they have been accused of not only a gruesome double murder, but the gruesome double murder of their own parents. Now, if you are not an old, withered dinosaur like me, let me assure you, this case was all anyone was talking about. It was on the nightly news every night on every station, all the time. It was one of the very first trials ever covered from start to finish by Court TV, which was brand new. Now, let me tell you, at this time, I didn't even know Court TV existed. I didn't find out about Court TV until the OJ trial in 1995. I lived in rural southern Utah, and Court TV was a small market station. It was only in the really big cities. Court TV didn't get picked up by most cable companies until the mid-1990s. But this case was televised for the few people in those large markets that had Court TV. For those that didn't have Court TV, there were snippets of the trial every single night on the news. And I mean every night, every day on the noon news, the 6 o'clock news, the 10 o'clock news. See, there used to be these things called channels. And there was this thing called the TV guide. And let me try to remember. But you would open the TV guide and it would tell you when the news was going to be on. But you always knew it was coming on for sure at 12, 6, and 10. The trial begins. Erik and Lyle go on trial in July of 1993, and it was better than any soap opera, housewives and beauty salons, barbershops, nail salons ever played on a regular basis. But no one was expecting what came out at the trial. Prosecutors, as expected, argued that the brothers killed their parents for financial gain. The brothers admitted that they killed their parents, but it was not for money. It was for self-preservation and self-defense because, you see, they claimed that their father, Jose Menendez, had been brutally sexually abusing both boys, physically abusing them, and emotionally abusing them since they were toddlers. Now, let me take you back to the dark ages, my friends. This was 1993. There was not a single gay character in a movie or on a TV show. Ellen DeGeneres hadn't even come out with her "I'm Lebanese" joke. Google that if you don't get it. She made a joke about being Lebanese instead of being a lesbian. She didn't even do that until 1996. We did not talk about homosexuality in 1993. I was out of high school and maybe 20 years old when I found out what a gay man was. I found out about what a gay man was when I got involved in the dance world, and there were a lot of gay men in the dance world. This was something that was not discussed, and we certainly did not talk about homosexual fathers who were also pedophiles and abused their sons. And I'm going to say something that still makes my blood boil. There were people who instantly discredited the Menendez brothers the second they made that allegation. The second the Menendez brothers said, our father was sexually abusing us, there were people that were like, oh, that doesn't happen. What father would do that to his sons? They're just crazy and making things up to excuse what they did. There was a lot of that going around. This was a very different time, as some of you know. These were matters that we just did not talk about. The trial goes on for 6 months. Every minute of it is captured and dissected on the evening news. Now, there were 2 juries because the brothers were being tried separately, but at the same time. In January of 1994, both juries came back with the same result: deadlocked. Neither jury could reach a verdict. There was no question that the brothers killed their parents, but some of the jurors had been convinced that the brothers did it out of self-defense. Thinking back to that culture at that time, it shows you what a difference there was in California from Southern Utah, because had that trial taken place in Southern Utah, they would have been convicted. No question. California has always been more progressive and ahead of the time. And it shows you that there were some people who believed that fathers did sexually abuse their sons, even though that was something we didn't talk about. In October of 1995, a retrial of the brothers began, but this time they were being tried together with one jury. And this time, for reasons we won't go into today, the defense chooses to leave out much of the evidence about sexual abuse, and it is a horrific mistake. In March of 1996, both brothers were convicted of first-degree murder. A few months later, in July, they were both sentenced to life in prison without the possibility of parole. The brothers then sit in prison for decades, but all the while, support is building for them, and now it has come to a point where certain facts can no longer be ignored. In 2023, a petition is filed with the courts asking the court to re-sentence the Menendez brothers. I'm going to go over some of the evidence presented as backing documentation for this request. First, let's talk about this letter from Erik Menendez to his cousin, a man named Andy Cano. This letter was found in Andy Cano's bedroom dresser in 2018 by author Robert Rand, who was writing a piece about this case and thinking about doing a documentary. He does end up doing the film. Erik Menendez was 17 years old when he wrote this letter, and it talks specifically about the horrific sexual abuse Erik is enduring, perpetrated by his own father. I'm going to put the letter up on the screen as I talk. If you want to read the whole thing, you can pause to read the entire letter. I'm going to read you the portions the defense is using as evidence. Erik writes, I've been trying to avoid Dad. It's still happening, Andy, but it's worse for me now. I can't explain it. He's so overweight that I can't stand to see him. I never know when it's going to happen, and it's driving me crazy. Every night, I stay up thinking he might come in. I need to put it out of my mind. I know what you said before, but I'm afraid. You just don't know Dad like I do. He's crazy. He's warned me 100 times about telling anyone, especially Lyle. So this young man has actually confided in a cousin, his confidant, which really surprises me because in a lot of these cases, people don't tell anyone. And it is a very sharp statement on the culture back then because not even the cousin was able to help his young relative. We just didn't have the means. At the first trial, a woman named Diane Vandermolen testified. Diane is the niece of Jose and Kitty, and she spent the summer of 1976 living with the family when the boys were just 8 and 6 years old. Diane testified at the first trial that one night in 1976, 8-year-old Lyle came into her bedroom and asked if he could sleep in her room because, quote, he and Dad had been touching each other in the genital area. Diane was shocked to hear this. She was a teenager. She went to Kitty and told her what happened. As Diane and Kitty were talking, Lyle walked into the room, this little 8-year-old boy. Kitty grabbed him by his arm and yanked him away, took him to his bedroom, and Diane realized at that point in time, Kitty knows. A man named Peter Cano, Lyle and Erik's uncle, testified at the first trial that once, when Lyle was 5 years old, he saw Jose take a full punch at Lyle, hitting him in the chest and knocking the young boy over in pain. This is a grown-ass man hitting a 5-year-old boy in the chest as hard as he can. It is disgusting. When Peter told Jose never to do that again and cussed him out, Jose told Peter, "I will raise my sons the way I see fit." And then he told Peter to get out of his house. Peter did leave, and he never went back to the Menendez house. His relationship with Jose ended on that day. Other families came forward and testified back in 1993, telling similar stories of how Jose would punch the boys in the stomach, hang them from the banister until they couldn't hang on any longer, slap them, and beat them. When Erik was 12, he told Andy that his father was giving him massages on his penis. Erik asked Andy, "Does your dad do the same thing?" Erik then swore Andy to secrecy. Now remember, this was all said in the first trial. Well, everything but the letter that wasn't discovered until 2018, and the first trial ends in hung juries. Most of this information was not included in the second trial when the brothers were convicted. And there are differing stories on why this happened. We'll go into it when we do the deep dive. Now, like I said, this was a very different time, and there were people who really and truly believed that the brothers were making up these allegations in order to excuse murdering their parents. And hey, if the boys would kill their own parents, they would most definitely make up lies about why they did it, right? Some people use these allegations of sexual abuse to strip the brothers of their credibility, and I think that's why the defense attorneys didn't use the allegations in the second trial. The culture was very homophobic back at that time, and homosexuality was erroneously conflated with pedophilia. We know now the two things have nothing to do with each other. There was also a very persuasive argument at the end of the first trial given by the prosecutor who said, "If you believe the sexual abuse happened, that doesn't make the defendants not guilty of murder. We do not execute child molesters in California, and these defendants cannot execute them either. Vigilantism is not something we can tolerate." Now, in some ways, I agree with that. I do. But there are caveats. Not even that argument persuaded the juries. Some of the jurors still voted not guilty. But the second trial was a whole different ballgame. So now we have this argument that the second trial, the attorneys in the second trial did not do their due diligence and did not jealously defend their clients, leaving out information that would most likely have ended in another hung jury. So part of this new argument, part of what's happening now, is that evidence that should have been presented at the second trial where the brothers were convicted was not. And we have the evidence of the letter found in 2018. And let's talk about one other piece of evidence before I get into what I feel is the real reason this case is being revisited. Many of you will remember this band called Menudo. It was a boy band, a very successful boy band that birthed stars like Ricky Martin. The actual story behind Menudo is really very dark, and I'm going to cover it here on the channel. When the boys would reach about 16 or 17 in the band, they'd get them when they were like 13. They'd reach about 16 or 17. They'd start to look too old, and they would just be replaced. There was like a revolving door of band members. And back when the band was popular, Jose Menendez was the record executive assigned to Menudo, and he had a lot of contact with the boys in the group. Now, remember the author, Robert Rand, who found the letter in Andy Cano's drawer? He has produced a new documentary about this situation, and it's called Menendez and Menudo, Boys Betrayed. It came out in 2023, and it's on Peacock if you would like to watch it. In this documentary, one of the former members of Menudo comes forward and makes some very damning allegations against Jose Menendez. The man's name is Roy Rosselló. He was just a teenager when the murders took place. He has come forward stating that he was by Jose Menendez. Roy said after the assault, he was in terrible pain for more than a week. He claims that when he was 14 years old, Jose Menendez drugged him before him while he was at the Menendez home. When Roy was shown a photo of Jose in the documentary, he says, That is the man here that raped me. That is the pedophile. For the most part, everything that Roy has to say has just been part of the documentary. His testimony has never been heard by a court. But Erik and Lyle's attorneys want that to change. So now we've got new allegations from a completely separate individual stating that Jose Menendez is in fact a pedophile, a rapist, and a monster. The attorneys claim that this witness has the right to be heard in court. And now I'm going to talk about the real reason I think this case is back in the news. I wanted to find some verification as to whether or not my theory on this is somewhat valid or way off base, and I did find some validation for my theory. I believe this case is back in the news, and the Menendez brothers have an army of supporters that want them released because of one thing: a major societal shift in how male victims of childhood sexual abuse are viewed. When this trial took place, there were nightly jokes on late night talk shows about the boys being raped by their father. They made fun of this trial on Saturday Night Live. These brothers were mocked. They were made so much fun of. And even when the jokes were really graphic, people laughed at them. When girls were molested at that time, it was all about men going to get their shotguns. When boys were molested, it was all about nothing because we did not talk about it. It was something that was considered so shameful, it wasn't even mentioned in whispers. Boys were not allowed to be victims of sexual abuse. It was not accepted. My validation was that I found some papers by a man named Carlos Cuevas, who is a professor of criminology and criminal justice at Northeastern University. And he says, as time has gone by, there has been more openness about talking about abuse in general, and particularly abuse of boys. As you all know, we are painfully aware of the horrific abuse that has gone on inside the Catholic Church, as well as within the Boy Scouts of America. The Mormon Church has even paid out millions of dollars in settlements to boys that were abused by men that were leaders in the Boy Scouts of America. The Catholic Church has paid millions of dollars in settlement to boys who were molested by priests. Tens of thousands of boys have been the victims of sexual abuse within these organizations and others, and it's something we now openly discuss. We sympathize and empathize with these men, and we feel sorry that they were so terribly abused and that they couldn't talk about it with anyone. We have evolved in that way. When you know better, do better. Well, it was not like that back then. Even now, when we discuss boys as victims more often, we still have a tendency to minimize the abuse. When a female teacher molests or a high school boy, there are still those that give it a wink, wink, oh, good for him, type vibe, which is disgusting. It's sick and it's wrong. Those are the same people that would, puff out their chests and talk about taking out a male teacher that had sex with a female student. But with boys, for some people, it's still, a cheeky boys club joke. Not for many of us, not for me. Any adult who has sexual contact with a child is a sex offender, period, the end. Any adult who has sexual contact with a child is a pedophile. There is no gray area. I think more and more people have come to realize that, and the tides have turned. The mindset is very different now than it was back then, and that has resulted in a swell of support for these two men to be released from prison because they were horribly abused as children. Now, of course, we have the philosophical discussion and the legal discussion where we could discuss whether or not it's ever okay to murder anyone. And I'm actually really excited to hear what you guys have to say in the comments. So a few weeks ago, a documentary came out on Netflix about the brothers and all the abuse they endured. The documentary on Netflix is simply called The Menendez Brothers. I watched it. It is a heartbreaking story. If half of what's in that documentary is true, the abuse that these boys suffered was absolutely horrific and life-changing. There is no way these boys could have grown up with any sort of healthy psychological status. It would be impossible to be abused to the extent that they were and be normal, whatever that is. Then last month, a fictionalized account of the story was also released on Netflix. It's part of the Monster series by Ryan Murphy. First, he did Dahmer last year, and this year he covered the Menendez brothers. The brothers are played by these two just absolutely stunningly beautiful men, and a lot of people The dramatized version has been very controversial. I'll just say that. Erik Menendez has apparently seen the Ryan Murphy production, and he has been critical, calling it inaccurate. But it is a drama. It's not a documentary. Suffice it to say, there has been a lot of interest in this case, and people have very strong opinions about it. So where do things stand now? This writ of habeas corpus was filed by Erik's attorney in 2023. It details the first trial, the second trial, and the new evidence in the form of the letter found in Andy's dresser and the statements made by Roy from Menudo. Los Angeles District Attorney George Gascon held a press conference on October 3rd, 2024, just a few weeks ago, and stated that although there is no doubt that the brothers killed their parents, there is substantial evidence that the young men did it in self-defense. Gascon says his office is re-examining the case from a modern-day standpoint with renewed understanding of and empathy for victims of sexual abuse. After that press conference, the DA held a second press conference stating that his office is going to ask the court to resentence Erik and Lyle Menendez, and that he is going to recommend to the judge that the brothers be eligible for immediate parole. The DA states that the men have served their time and their debt to society is paid. He will ask the judge to reduce their sentences to 50 years to life, but there is a consideration in California law on that sentence because the men were under the age of 26 when they committed the crime. This consideration means they would be eligible for parole immediately. Just a few days ago, a Los Angeles judge held an in-camera hearing and set a date to hear arguments that the Menendez brothers should be resentenced, which would result in their release. The DA has stated he strongly supports clemency for the brothers. There has also been an appeal to Governor Gavin Newsom's office for clemency, but the governor's office will not comment at this time. The DA also says that while he disapproves of the way the young men handled their abuse, he has reviewed their prison records. Both men are involved in many projects regarding prison reform and prisoner reintegration. They haven't had any major disciplinary problems in prison. They have been model prisoners, and Gascon believes they can be productive members of society. I just cannot help but think of the women that are going to come out of the woodwork. I believe when these guys are released, it is going to be... You think Wade Wilson was a shit show? No, this is going to be that on steroids. I don't actually like the comparison I just made. So let me take that back. I don't look at the Menendez brothers the same way I look at Wade Wilson. I'm just saying there's going to be a lot of women going nuts. Women like to fix things, you know. We like to fix a man. We're going to fix that man. Spoiler alert, you don't fix anybody. You don't change anybody. The DA has asked that the judge consider the science and the newer understanding of how sexual abuse affects boys and young men, how they respond, how they react to that abuse, and how that might not have been information that was available back in 1993. So, what do you think about this case? I am really, really curious. I haven't actually talked about this online at all. And you know that I am an actual shut-in, so I don't talk to people. So I am so curious. I don't know if you guys are going to be like raging they should stay in prison or if you're going to be sympathetic. I'm like really excited to find out. I will tell you flat out, I am okay with Erik and Lyle being released. What they did to their parents was wrong. They have paid with the best years of their life. They have been in prison for 35 years. I believe their debt to society has been paid. They didn't rob a store and kill a clerk. They murdered their abusers. Is that against the law? Absolutely. Are there extenuating circumstances from trial to trial, case to case, person to person? Yes, and the courts allow for that. I also believe that we have a lot to learn from the Menendez brothers, and their stories are worth hearing. I want to know their views, their memories, their take on prison. I want to know how their psyche works. I want to know what stands out in their mind the most about the abuse. Maybe they don't want to share that, but I do believe they have a lot to offer. You know that I firmly believe the only way we can learn from these terrible crimes is by studying why they happen and the people who commit them. And I believe Erik and Lyle Menendez can contribute to that conversation. I'm going to stay right on top of this. I will let you know as soon as we know anything more about the hearing that could release the Menendez brothers before Christmas. This is exciting. It's tragic. It's dramatic. It's part of pop culture. It's just a huge case. And I am dying to know what you think. Thank you for joining me today on Dark Hearts with Stacy Lee. Please hit the like button and subscribe to the channel if you want to support me. You know, I'm kind of in my final push to stay here on YouTube. It's been 4.5 years and the channel just hasn't grown. And my promoter thinks I'm shadow banned. He doesn't think the channel may ever grow. I don't know. We're just going to have to see. But if you share the name of the channel in the comment sections on other channels, you tell people about it, you share it on social media, it definitely helps. You know, I have 2 podcasts. This one's called Dining with Death. It's just the audio taken from old videos posted to YouTube years ago. And this is the current podcast. I post new episodes every Monday and every Wednesday, and you will hear some podcast exclusive stories here, stories you cannot hear anywhere else. Both podcasts are available on Apple, Spotify, and Amazon. I want to give a special thank you to my patrons. Some of you donate a few dollars a month to help me keep the episodes coming. You're really the only reason that I'm still here. You can find me on Patreon if you would like to become a patron, and you can watch this short little video if you would like to donate a few bucks to our fundraiser. We are trying to solve some cold cases. This video explains everything we are doing to donate money to police departments to get cold case DNA kits tested. I want you to know how much I appreciate you. Some of you have been with me for years. You're family to me, and I hope you're doing well. Stay safe, my friends, and be kind to each other, and I will see you next time on Dark Hearts with Stacy Lee. Bye.